Harmony is a special autism service dog, and primarily she provides him with support and safety. She makes sure that he stays with us and that they are kind of attached at the hip, if you will.
You know, there are moments in that video where I do tear up a little bit, where you feel a great upsurge of empathy for that individual and a great surge of respect for the relationship between that animal and that person. But I'm also not a person who's completely blinded by that, who is going to take that emotional response and not be able to see past it, not be able to see any other side to anything else. And I do believe the subject of service dogs has another side, has a side that is a little bit dark.
And only the dogs who accept the harness and accept the training, those dogs are used.
And the dog has to take the step when you tell them to take a step, not when you move. Different than if it was a human helping them. Then they feel like they're a burden. But with the dog, they feel like it's a team.
I've never seen a dog that's as happy as her when she's on a harness, and yeah, I really just don't believe it's neglect. I believe that we're a team.
My parents' dog, for example, who is always super excited when my dad gets out like the thing for around his neck to go walking, or you know, take him across the street so he doesn't get harmed and stuff like that. Dog is like, it's different than a human.
The dog needs me to stay alive, I need the dog to stay alive. The dog needs me to stay alive, I need the dog to stay alive. The dog needs me to stay alive.
Dog needs me to stay alive.
Discussions about what a dog feels, what a dog thinks, what makes a dog happy are very ambiguous to me. What I am interested in is looking at my own experiences related to some of these topics and reflecting on them and honestly expressing how I feel. I think that's the best I can do, take it or leave it. I do acknowledge that there's some gray area on this subject. I'm coming at this from someone who can see why you would feel empathy, can understand it, who has experienced feelings of empathy for the work of service dogs and what they provide people. But I also see on some other level the reality that in this business, animals are selected and animals are broken. That animals are feeded through and sorted out for the ones that will be most amenable to the requirements of the job. And the requirements of the job on a lot of levels are not to be a dog.
And so many times we will go out with practicing with our own service dogs in training and see some of these dogs that are just totally inappropriate in terms of their behavior. They might bark in a store, they might pull and lunge on a leash. Worse, they might come to attack a legitimate service dog. And service dogs are taught not to fight. We don't want dogs that are aggressive. So if they're attacked by another dog, they are going to be passive.
The instincts that a normal dog has, that a normal animal has, to want to defend itself, defend its territory, to interact, communicate with other individuals of its own species. The desire to do things such as mate, to some degree play, to a very large degree to be a dog, to be an animal, are things that are weeded out, things that are trained out. And I wonder if this kind of training on some level takes something away from them.
But then the dog comes in a new home and they start to see the new people as their pack.
Vigan is someone that I've interacted very briefly and limitedly on this topic in comment sections. But it seems clear to me, and I feel relatively confident saying that she very strongly believes that dogs can have very strong connections to humans, that they can see humans as a pack, and that there's scientific evidence to back this up. Maybe so. But is there something subtly sinister, subtly creepy about these relationships that we have with these animals?
One of the reasons why I prefer to use the term political science rather than political philosophy is that I do really care about the practicalities of all these questions. You can sit down and have a debate in an academic context or in a coffee shop around the table with some friends, asking what really was the correct thing for the President of the United States to do after September 11th, 2001. You can do it in a totally fantasy, unrealistic, hypothetical manner, but probably even within a casual conversation, inevitably, your attention will turn toward practical details. The best case scenario simply is not worth imagining without delving into the worst case scenario and all the strange practical obstacles that would make the best case scenario unattainable. I think that a group of intelligent people having that conversation very soon would veer away from merely reproaching the President of the United States for not doing what was ideal, and would very soon become interested in all the things that make those ideals unattainable. And my channel is one of the few that really wants to get away from merely talking about ideals when we talk about veganism. Although the ideals are, of course, still worth preaching, I just assume the type of people who watch this channel don't want to be preached to anymore. And I think those are the viewers I keep. You know, plenty of other channels that are going to preach the same thing to you again and again. You know, if you already are vegan, you've heard it before. If you're not vegan, you've probably heard it before and don't want to hear it again either. So we got to tiptoe around these issues sometimes and be very clear. When are we talking brass tacks? When are we talking about practical issues? And when are we talking about real ideals? Now, this video I'm sharing with you today obviously exists in part to promote the YouTube channel of this guy, Jay Costley. I'm going to give you a link. You know I'm interested in promoting other vegan channels that are not selling you a diet book, that are not selling you a dream. They're talking about something real within veganism, whether those are political problems, practical problems, or otherwise. This guy, Jay Costley, part of his steez is that he's a former zoo employee with a vegan perspective on the reality of what goes on inside of zoos. He has an incredibly grim video talking about killing animals inside the zoo, killing animals that are fed as meat to the denizens of the zoo. I've never heard any other vegan talk about that aside from myself. But you've heard in recent videos where I was saying, look, every day you keep a tiger alive inside a zoo, captive breeding program, or a program that's trying to restore them to living in the wild in their habitat. No matter how well intentioned the program is, where you're keeping tigers in captivity, every single day that tiger is there, you're killing cows, chickens, lambs, you're killing other animals in order to keep that tiger alive in captivity. So there are some interesting questions of speciesism in practice. But of all the videos I chose to feature from Jay's channel just now, this one, where I've cut it off here, he's raising this question of the relationships between humans and dogs being creepy. And you know, I think that actually is a substantive question, and I think it's a reason for all of us as vegans to look in the mirror. Because the truth is that we do go around reproaching meat eaters with the thought that what happens on a dairy farm is creepy. Now, philosophically or politically, what's at the root of that claim? What does it mean when I tell you that something that is 100% standard procedure on hundreds of thousands of farms involving millions of cows is creepy or unnatural or strange? People within the dairy industry often just respond with disbelief. They say, what do you mean? This is totally normal. This is normal in the business. This is normal in the industry. But we as vegans are stepping forward and trying to make this argument that no, business as usual is not normal, is not acceptable, and in fact, it's creepy. It's disturbing. You know, where do baby cows come from? How actually are cows on a dairy farm impregnated? What actually happens to the calves after they're born? That process, you know, and even the act of drinking milk itself, the basic concept that a human being as a biped would be drinking the milk out of a quadruped's boob. We're out there making this argument that that's creepy. And of course, I'm vegan. I mean, you know, those arguments speak to me. I think they're still meaningful and worthwhile, even if creepiness is not really the most philosophically compelling concept, or it's not the most politically discreet concept, or what have you. I do think that argument has merit, and I've made it myself when talking to people face to face. But of course, on the other hand, the strong suit the meat eaters have to say back is, what? No, this isn't creepy, it's normal. Millions and millions of people do it. And it's a bit bizarre and hilarious to me that, the responses from vegans justifying pet ownership come down to these same stupid arguments. They're just as dumb and self-righteous as meat eaters justifying what's normal. My fellow vegans justifying owning of dogs, castrating dogs, etc. Now, I received an especially disturbing message that I've decided not to read out to you from a vegan dog owner who chose to explain to me, and this was not trolling. This is someone who's been a fan of my channel, I think, for at least a year, someone who's written me fan mail over a long period of time. And this person, they're a fan, but they also disagree with me on issues. This person wrote in boasting that her own pet dogs, although they had been castrated, still had a normal sexual response and still had orgasms. Creepy. Already, this is creepy. And she, as the human owner of these dogs, knows this because she provides her dogs on a daily basis with inflatable airline neck pillows that her dogs use to simulate coitus to the point of ejaculation. She was not writing this to me in agreement with me or saying, well, I admit this is a bit creepy or disturbing. No. She was writing this to me with all the self-righteousness of an employee of the meat and dairy industry, saying that no, the way veal crates work is completely normal. The way rape racks work is completely normal. And by the way, the term rape rack is an industry term. That's not a term vegans made up. If you look at catalogs of farm equipment, you can find illustrations with the term rape rack used to describe the metal racks used for cows. Okay? She was writing to me with the self-righteousness of a narrow-minded person confidently telling you what's normal. And from her perspective, what's normal is that as a human being, not only does she stoop onto the ground and with her hands pick up the feces of a dog on a daily basis, the poo of a dog, but apparently, I guess she gets out some kind of towel and literally wipes up the jizz that her pet dogs ejaculate. Okay, I think it does matter. I think the question of creepiness does matter. I think the question of whether or not you're willing to examine psychologically what it means to own a companion animal, I think it does matter. I think there are dimensions to this that really go beyond even the type of demented cruelty that's involved with human slavery. And human slavery historically did involve castration in a tiny minority of cases. But I mean, in the vast majority of cases, you have to recognize the reason why slavery was so stable as a social institution was that some slaves had a good quality of life. Some slaves were happy, the same way people can boast that some dogs are happy. I've never even disputed that fact. I mean, that's meaningless. As with the justifications for slavery, I want to ask the fundamental questions of principle about whether this is right or wrong. And then looking ahead, I also want to ask the practical and pragmatic questions of how can we have a future where humans and animals live on the same planet. And you guys have heard me give my answer to that. One of my very first videos on this topic, I pointed out, look, when you watch Star Wars or Star Trek or some science fiction universe, are there dogs on the Starship Enterprise? Is our vision of the future one in which the, enslavement, debasement, the domestication of animals for food, fur, companionship, entertainment, is that a perpetual part of our culture for the next 500 years, the next 1,000 years? Or do we as vegans see ourselves in a period of transition where just like we want to transition away from being a society that smokes cigarettes, we also want to be in a transition that eventually brings about the end of the domestication of animals? For me, that's not a difficult question to answer. For me, it is not difficult to say in the future, I don't think dogs should be groomed or bred or castrated to be companions to human beings. I don't know why that would be difficult for any vegan to give that answer. But I did have one question come in here on YouTube from a longtime fan called Twisted Hippie. He's a fan, but again, he doesn't mind disagreeing with me. He doesn't mind criticizing me when he disagrees with me, which is great. Certainly welcome. And several people commented that they found my answer to his question enlightening. That, well, for whatever reason, they didn't really understand my point about domestication of animals until they read this. So I'm going to read it out now. I don't know why that is, but many people said this clarified matters for them. I agree, but on a practical level, what do we do with the rescue animals already existing? No animal should be forced to live in a human home when it doesn't come close to its natural environment. However, if the alternative is euthanasia? Question mark. Right? So here's my reply to this guy. I believe I have discussed this at sufficient length, both on YouTube and within Patreon. Viz., I agree, but on a practical level, what do we do with the rescue animals already existing? The reality is that vegans don't have an answer for the question of, what will we do with all the cows if the slaughterhouse owners suddenly became vegan and refused to kill them? We probably have no good answer as to what to do with farm animals if millions and millions of them suddenly could not be killed and could not be reintroduced to the wild, etc. So pause. Obviously, if even a single large farm owner suddenly declared that he wanted to do the right thing, he wanted to save the lives of all of his cows, several thousand cows, those cows can't live in the forest. What actually would you do as a vegan, you personally, if you suddenly had several thousand cows in your hands? Yeah. However, we can recognize that this is really a spurious and unreasonable argument when meat eaters raise it. So if meat eaters say this to you as a reproach, how can you possibly be vegan given that you have no solution for what to do with these animals today? If all the slaughterhouses close today, if all the meat producing factory farms close today, we can recognize that it's spurious and unreasonable. Why is it that we have so much difficulty in recognizing a precisely parallel problem in the domestication of animals as pets? The end of the cycle of domestication, like the end of the cycle of industrialized slaughter, has to start somewhere. And it has to start with someone. I'm asking you, sincerely, to consider that it starts with us, vegans. But most of us are in a state of extreme denialism and can't even admit that this is a problem. Yet. I've raised for you guys a whole series of problems where all I've been trying to do is to get you to admit that they're problematic. Castration is problematic. Killing cows to feed dogs is problematic. Killing lambs to feed cats is problematic. And yes, even these psychological dimensions of how people live with dogs after those dogs have been castrated, trained, had their will broken, had their sex lives taken away from them, had any chance of an independent life of dignity taken away from them, when these dogs have lived their whole lives without ever knowing what it's like to be in a pack, never knowing what it's like to be in a forest. I have just been saying that this is problematic, and the very real hatred and obloquy directed towards me by the vast majority of vegans has been manifest and demonstrated all. But this is the question I have to ask for you. If we, as vegans, can't just admit that this is a problem and think critically about what direction we're going in the future, who can?